Hello, Dr. R. Michael Fisher, fearologist, educator, researcher, scholar, independent scholar on the entire study of fear and fearlessness that I've been doing since 1989. Today's presentation is pretty much for people who are more interested in theory, philosophical premises for our theory, and the actual theory of fear management. And that includes obviously my ideas of fear education. But this presentation, I just thought, I need to summarize what the prepositions, presuppositions, I guess is the proper word, behind my fear management theory and connect it in some way. And I'm going to only do that very loosely today to terror management theory. Now, those are the two sort of ways that I sort of focus on and think are sort of the most rigorous treatments of how to come to a relationship with fear in a good way, how to be able to make good critical distinctions, and perhaps get around, that's the ideal, the pathologies of our current fear management systems. And the theories that support those systems, whether those theories are actually articulated carefully or mostly they're not articulated carefully. Everybody has an opinion about fear. Virtually everybody will write something about fear someplace that, people who are, I'm talking everybody in terms of talking about, where the world's going, where it needs to go, what is the role of education, et cetera, et cetera. How do we have a good society? So I'm going to just really go into the PowerPoint that I created, a very simple, basic one, and let's go from there. Screen share. PowerPoint up here. There we go. All right, so basically you can see I'm going to be comparing somewhat to terror management theory, and terror management theory I'm not going to go into today, only in that it has developed the most rigorous theory on fear. Now you can hear, well, it's called terror management theory, and I'm going, well, various conversations I've had with terror management theorists, as well as just my study of the literature of terror management theory for the last few decades, off and on as I've studied it, just tells me that it could just as easily be called fear management theory. That's not the case. They chose to use terror management theory, and that's a whole other longer discussion. So let's just go into my position on this dialogue that I'm wishing to have with terror management theory, even though this particular presentation, as I say, is not about that connection with terror management theory per se. You can look at my last two videos, please do if you want, Fear Talks 17A and B with Dr. Songe, and you'll get a good sense of what terror management theory is and my perspective as we go into dialogue on it. There's also a really good talk I did with Sheldon Solomon, one of the founders of terror management theory, as well on my YouTube channel. You can look all that up if you want. So let's just get started. Fear management theory starts with, there is something wrong in the field of fear management. I wrote that in 2010 in a book, which I'll talk about at the end of this presentation. It's always a good, strong place, right? Controversial, contradictory, challenges the entire field of fear management. Sounds a bit arrogant, I must say, but not at all intended to be. I think it actually is, there is something fundamentally wrong. So that's how I start my theory, right? That actually is the beginning, presupposition. And fear management theory is a unique, atypical means of correction for that error, that missing piece. And it's more than one piece, it's many pieces. It's really perspectives that are one of my biggest critiques in fear management theory. Our greatest fear is not fear of death or of life, but the fear that we may not understand fear as good as we think we do. I cannot go into describing every one of my presuppositions for this theory. This video would take hours. So I can really just throw these out to stir up your attention. You can study them. We can have conversations. You can have conversations with each other. And I'd love people to really engage this theory and improve it. I have not, made this super, super clear. I have not thought about, how to create this particular theory so it's a nice, clean theory that can then be tested in the experimental lab and collect empirical research. Um, I'm just really giving you my 33 years of experience in a few statements. Next part of fear management theory presupposition is our widespread global educational disease. A few different people have said that. Sam Gillian has used that term. Is founded upon our miseducation about the nature and role of fear. We need a new fear studies field and concomitant fear education. Well, I've pretty much been the one to coin those last two terms. And that is a fear management education. Again, that's my term, as a cure. We need a critical, transdisciplinary, and aperspectival holistic integral approach to fear management. Sounds like a lot of big words. Can't go into all that, but aperspectival comes from the work of Jean Gebser, cultural artist, historian, theorist, Ken Wilber, integral theorist. Aperspectival is just a very interesting kind of consciousness and a way of approaching knowledge, period, which basically says let's take in all perspectives, but do not privilege any particular one of them. I guess if there is a privileged perspective in the aperspectival, it is to be aperspectival. Kind of a meta theory in that way of knowledge. So I'm wanting to use that approach rather than focus on just the psychology, right? One discipline of fear. And or I'm even going beyond interdisciplinary, where we add up the psychology of fear with the philosophy of fear, with the geography of fear theorists or thinkers, or various disciplines as well. I am interested in something that transcends all those, and that's why transdisciplinary, a larger conversation on that I cannot go into. Fear management would much improve with this kind of critical transdisciplinary aperspectival. And the question's more, where is fear? What work does it do? What is a fear ecology? These are all more priority than the pursuit of what is fear, which is the typical and often dominating by far methodological orientation toward fear and its management. Next one is fear, and fear with these little scare marks. One of my techniques, I've only seen a few rare people use it, but I use it in a much more complex way. Cannot go into that, but it's basically a culturally complex way. So fear serves as a larger umbrella concept and phenomenon, while terror, that is terror management, is a subset thereof. There are many contradictions, guises, and problems in our fear knowledge that have to be taken as a complex fear phenomenon rather than a simple one. Terror management theory has not incorporated this kind of complexity to a fear management theory. Socialities, which is really where terror management theory and coming out of social psychology particularly, my own work, which has, as I say, transdisciplinary, has gone beyond the individualist psychology of fear, includes it, but definitely transcends, goes beyond, integrates multiple perspectives, but ultimately the world of the social, the relational world. And that sociality idea is out of sociology itself as a discipline. That concept is very broad, very wide, can include so much. And it is the larger umbrella beyond even culture, much more inclusive worldviews, and on and on. Cannot go into describing what sociology is totally. And the former is less controllable than culture to the impacts of fear management. So sociality, in some way, I'm suggesting beyond culture as a concept, structure, will probably be the better route to uncover and dissipate manage and transform the darker side of culture itself, the culture of fear, for example. Sociology, from a fear management theory perspective, includes critically and foundationally the gathering question or principle, something like this. I'm just trying to put it in simple language of when two or more gather, who's going to control fear management? And by corollary, who's going to control the theory of fear management? Concomitantly, this is the I, we, it problem. There's a lot of complexity in that. I cannot go into right now in the moment. Fear is not divided into positive fear and negative fear, as is typical to fear discourses, but rather fear is studied and worked with in a methodology, a philosophy of fearlessness and fearism, including a fearless standpoint theory of fear management. These are a lot of constructs, especially fearless standpoint theory is totally unique to myself. Not go into them, but these would be essential to understanding fear management theory suppositions. Fearlessness and fearless like courage do not mean without fear in an absolute sense. They represent not merely neurobiological based state traits or behaviors, but much more complex architectures and ecologies of fear based upon a centralization of a notion of consciousness. So there is a theory, a meta theory actually of consciousness, aperspectively, integrally, as a spectrum of consciousness below all of my presuppositions as to understanding reality, really. And then I think we're near the end here of presuppositions. Fearlessness is not pathologized as hegemonic Western medicine psychology has so construed it. If you look up in a Western psychology search on the internet or through the indexes of research, fearlessness comes up often, virtually every time, as a pathology. This is not true. It is not accurate to a total global integral transdisciplinary perspective of fearlessness. And obviously, fearlessness is dependent on the notion of fearless. And I think here's where I show. My last presupposition, I think, is fear/fearlessness is a dialectical relationship that cannot be separated. They are dynamic and understood as the evolutionary fear management unit of identification in a spectrum of consciousness, and most foundational to the construction of a complementary theory of fear management systems theory. Fear management systems theory being really the larger overall theory underneath my work. Most everyone who's ever read or looked at my work do not comment on this theory at all. They have completely avoided it. I don't know why. It just may be too complex for them to bring into their fear discourses. So those presuppositions aside, the real more interesting fundamental part that's harder to articulate, well, what is this fear management theory? How would we be able to jot it down, even start to learn it, memorize it, take it into our perspectives of thinking about fear and fearlessness, etc., sociality, and actually try to work with it and put it into testable, you know, units that could actually be researched upon empirically, experimentally, and or just tweezed and philosophically critiqued from other theories, point of views, and or philosophies. Here's my quick go at trying to put down some basic elements. I cannot go into detail. There are so many sub-theories also that spin off, as I understand it, from fear management theory. Can be applied to all living things, non-living as well, yet focuses on the most impactful and most dangerous creature on earth, the human being. Start your theory off that way, a little controversy. And everybody in every natural and cultural process is involved in the pursuit of learning about fear for the purposes of enacting a more effective fear management regime, driven by the survival instinct to create the best defense intelligence systems. Yeah, one has to linger with some of that And of course, you can see I'm putting it into a learning framework. It really is a fear management learning theory in a way. Fear management, if left on its own as a functional understanding only, will be harmfully reductionistic, if not violent epistemologically, to the overall primary meta motivation for living creatures to grow and develop fearulally, analogous to sexually. If we only talk about fear management, here's fears, how do we manage them better, cope with them, etc., heal them, whatever. If we only talk about that in that functional way, we will miss the whole notion of the growth and development of our fearuality as a species. And you can see I've made that analogous to the sexuality is much more broader concept, deeper than the notion of just sex and sex management, if you will. Can't go into that further, but it's a great comparison between fear and sex and how we create knowledges and educate around both of them. I find them very similar, and one can learn a lot about fear if you use the analogies from sex. All right, the creation of and impact of the most dangerous situations carried forward through human history are connected and patterned around a dynamic evolutionary fear problematic. It's one of my terms that has not been resolved due to insufficient, often distorted recognition, defining methodologies, and imaginaries of fear itself, and especially culturally modified fear with the Marx. Human knowledge on fear, that is, its epistemology of fear, is far more important to understand and improve upon in its influence on fear management than understanding fear, example, as a feeling or emotion, a brain-based neurological circuitry. There's not a lot of emphasis on fears, phobias, etc., 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 all the different kinds in fear management theory. It doesn't exclude that kind of thinking and emphasis. It just doesn't give a lot of attention to it. A lot of reasons behind why it doesn't. I can't go into the theory. Fear management theory, the extinction of species on Earth, including the near coming demise of our own species, is a problem of rampant pathological forms of fear management or fear management systems not healing and not operating as a whole along a spectrum of fear management systems. In other words, they're isolated, rampant, pathological, sometimes called arrogant systems operating within the larger whole systems of this defense intelligence, which I mentioned earlier as one of the presumptions. And obviously, I have a spectrum theory of 0 to 9, which is 10 different fear systems that have evolved throughout basically life. Cannot go into that, but I do say as I end the slide, the best overall detailed construction of the foundations for this fearlessness paradigm, really, which is what I brought to fear management theory and education. This really is summarized and wrapped up, not complete. It's totally in process. It's still very preliminary. It still has lots of problems. The World's Fearlessness Teachings book, A Critical Approach, Integral Approach to Fear Management Education in the 21st Century, a book I did in 2010, which really is a summarizing of a lot of my thinking, research. Again, I'm a scholar researcher, and I have a ton of experience in working with groups and people in my own processes experientially, but I've not had the conditions or the institutional funding and support to do empirical research, that would show this is a great science that I've constructed or anything like that. So in that sense, I'll just share. Really, you're seeing, is it all speculative, I've said? Well, there's a lot of speculative in what I've just presented as a theory. And theories are speculative. And they're based on this one, particularly a lot of phenomenological, hermeneutical, experiential, co-participative research, but not a lot of serious, formal, well-funded long-term studies. No, it's collecting a lot of synthesis and pulling a lot of things together. So I don't make any big claims, this is the truth and the best way, although I'm pretty convinced it's the best theoretical approach to fear management that exists on our planet today. Thanks for being with me today. Let's continue this conversation.